The Federal Highway Administration says only 7 or 8 charging stations have been produced with a $7.5 billion investment that taxpayers made back in 2021. Why isn't that happening more quickly?
So the president's goal is to have 500,000 chargers up by the end of this decade.
What in the hell are you talking about? Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg appeared on Face the Nation this week, and they trot Pete Buttigieg out there to try to speak on behalf of the Biden administration because, well, he's the only one without any shame. He is just fine lying to your face about how wonderful things are. He brings out his Kermit the Frog with a stuffed up nose kind of approach. And he delivers his remarks in a way that makes everyone say, oh, isn't that Pete Buttigieg nice? He reminds me of everybody's gay nephew. So he rolls himself out there to talk about how great things are going with the Biden administration. And something remarkable happened. He was actually asked a question or two and then challenged with a follow-up or two.
I want to ask you about something that we hear quite a lot about on the campaign trail, and that is electric cars, electric vehicles. Donald Trump repeatedly talks about President Biden's decision to force the industry towards making 56% of car batteries electric by 2032, 13% hybrid. Listen to what he said in New Jersey recently.
Do you notice he's trying to save the electrical vehicle, but not the gas-powered, which is the vehicle that everybody wants? They're going crazy with the electric car, costing us a fortune. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars subsidizing a car that nobody wants and nobody's ever going to buy.
He's not wrong.
Oh, he's
on
wrong.
The purchasing. He's not. Of the 4 million vehicles purchased, 269,000 electric vehicles were sold in the U.S. market. It's up like 2%.
Every single year, more Americans buy EVs
but
than
why
the year. Well, this is really important.
More quickly.
Every single year, more Americans buy EVs than the year prior. There are two things.
Now, as much as I appreciate her saying he's not wrong, people aren't buying these cars, she isn't pushing back on the lie that you were just told, or the made up truth. Yes, every year more and more people buy electric cars, but not because the market demands are there. No, there are federal government mandates, there are state mandates, there are local municipalities who are bending over backwards to buy electric vehicles. Many cities and counties were given free money from the federal government to convert school buses or other vehicles that they currently use into electric vehicles. That's part of that 2% number. Okay. So given the market demands, when you actually look at the performance of electric vehicles, their convenience, and the American consumer satisfaction with them, other than Tesla, it's a complete and total disaster. All right. Ford made a lot of publicity by converting their famous and very popular F-150 pickup truck to an electric option. They reported earlier this year that they were losing over $135,000 per vehicle. And after 1 year, they've ended the program completely. And one would argue that the only reason they started the program in the first place is because all of those billions of dollars that they got from the federal government, like a gun to their head, forcing them to do so. The fact of the matter is, right now, there is only one popular and market-friendly electric car in America, and that is made by the man the Biden administration hates, Elon Musk, Tesla. And at this point, even Tesla has sort of saturated the market, and their figures are down a little bit. So the fact is, listen, if people want electric cars, let them get electric cars. If people don't want electric cars, that's okay too. The only point Trump is making is that they're forcing it down your throats and spending billions of tax dollars to try to incentivize these things that nobody wants. So when Pete Buttigieg says every year more and more people are buying electric cars, they're buying it literally because their governments are buying it and they're forced to do so.
That I think are needed for that to happen even more quickly. One is the price, which is why the Inflation Reduction Act acted to cut the price of an electric vehicle. The second is making sure we have the charging network we need across America. But I want to talk about the bigger point here. And I take this very personally because I grew up in the industrial Midwest, literally in the shadow of broken down factories from car companies that did not survive into the turn of the century because they
And
didn't
many of
keep
those
up
auto
with the
workers
times.
are concerned that electric vehicles require fewer humans to manufacture.
The most important thing is that the EV revolution will happen with or without us, and we've got to make sure that it's American led. And
You know, they say that a lot. And I gotta at some point say, what in the hell are you talking about? What does that mean? The electric vehicle revolution is going to happen with or without us. Well, how exactly does it happen without us? Have you actually thought about this? Because I hear it all the time. I hear it from him. I hear it from Elizabeth Granholm. I hear it from Kamala Harris. I hear it from Joe Biden when it's on the teleprompter for him to read because he has no idea what he's talking about anyway. But have you actually broken that down for a second? The electric. So I guess they're saying that we're all going to be driving electric vehicles at some point, and if American manufacturers don't get on board, it's going to be all Chinese-made electric vehicles, right? So it's going to happen with or without us. So we better get on board and we better do it. Who's we in this equation exactly? Right? So it's not like the American automobile manufacturers have been terrified of this and they're begging the federal government to subsidize their development of electric vehicles. No, that's not the case in any way whatsoever. It's actually the opposite. They've been resisting moving in this direction because it's not cost effective and there isn't a demand for it. And as you just heard, there isn't a network of electric chargers to be able to accommodate the needs of everyone driving an electric vehicle instead of an internal combustion engine. No, it's the federal government who's been forcing this on the manufacturers against their will. So when Pete Buttigieg and the Biden administration say the electric vehicle revolution is going to happen with or without us, we better get on board. What they're saying is we know better than the automobile manufacturers. We know what's going to happen with transportation and with the American public's demand for electric cars. So we're going to force this thing to happen. It makes no sense. It's top-down, statist-run economic principles and theories which literally never work. Now, it would be one thing if the American people were clamoring for electric cars and we had no options. And so all we could do was go to China. But that's not the case. So what exactly does it mean? It's a lie. It means nothing, and it makes no logical sense if you have any basic understanding of economic free market principles, which, of course, Pete Buttigieg doesn't.
And that's what the president is focused on. We don't want China. Look, under the Trump administration, they allowed China to build an advantage in the EV industry. But under President Biden's leadership, we're making sure that the EV revolution will be a made in America EV revolution that
Because
is
of these tariffs
critically
you're
important.
talking about that President Biden says he's going to roll
Also,
out.
just making sure we invest in America's capacity, making sure that we are onshoring or friendshoring the materials and the processing of what goes into these EVs, making sure that America masters these processes. Because look, there's no way that we're going to get to the middle of this century with the technology that we counted on a century ago. Now, there are obviously a lot of voices here in Washington who are interested in keeping the status quo.
He says it's going to be one of the first things he does.
Would
if
be
he's
happy to
reelected.
see Americans trapped with dirty and expensive fuels.
Yeah, let's get to that dirty part real fast. Dirty and expensive fuels. First of all, you know that the only reason that oil and refined oil into gasoline is expensive right now is because of that guy and his boss, Joe Biden. It was cheaper than it's ever been. Well, cheaper than in the last 20 years under Donald Trump. We can be completely fuel independent and oil independent and energy independent if we just get the government out of the way and let the market go and let drilling occur in this country. Everybody knows that. Number one. Number two, dirty. You know what they mean when they say dirty, right? They mean carbon emissions. You know, carbon dioxide is invisible. So by definition, it's not dirty, but they've redefined clean air and dirty air to reflect how much carbon dioxide is in the air because they still believe in this global warming thing. It's all global warming, this entire thing. Oh, we're going to get to the middle of this century and everyone's going to be driving electric cars. Why? Why? Because world governments will force you to drive an electric car because world governments have decided that carbon emissions are going to destroy the planet. even though it's still a theory and they don't have any proof of that. By the way, where are you going to get that electricity for those electric vehicles? Oh, from coal burning plants, and otherwise, because we certainly can't use nuclear power either. All of this is a scam. It's a pyramid scheme, and they've put themselves at the top of it, the global elites. You know that. You've been seeing the entire thing happen before your very eyes. And ask Pete Buttigieg real fast, who's making all of the batteries for these cars? Who's refining the materials for these batteries? Who's cornered the market on all of that stuff? That would be his friends and Joe Biden's friends and Joe Biden's son's friends in China. All of this is a lie. But I got to tell you, when it comes to the question of this network of electric chargers that you're about to see, Pete Buttigieg is actually challenged a little bit here, and he's got nothing.
But the reality, and I know he's made a lot of promises to the oil and gas CEOs about some of the favors that he believes.
But
his
it
administration
obviously is
will deliver
resonating
them.
for him because he wouldn't bring it up so frequently if there wasn't some anxiety that he's tapping into. And let me ask you about a portion of this that I think does fall under your portfolio, and that's the charging stations you mentioned. The Federal Highway Administration says only 7 or 8 charging stations have been produced with a $7.5 billion investment that taxpayers made back in 2021. Why isn't that happening more quickly?
So the president's goal is to have 500,000 chargers up by the end of this decade. Now, in order to do a charger, it's more than just plunking a small device into the ground. There's utility work, and this is also really a new category of federal investment.
Why do people like this guy so much? He is so patronizing and so condescending and so arrogant. Honestly, if he was sitting at my kitchen table talking to me like this, I would want to smack him across the face. It's much more complicated than just plugging a device into the ground and turning it on. $7.5 billion, 8 chargers have been installed so far. Really, there's a lot involved here. Really, how did we get a network of gas stations in this country? Competing gas stations, by the way. You got your Shell, you got your Texaco, you got your Exxon, you got your Chevron. You got worldwide international companies begging to install a new gas station on your street corner so that they can sell you gas at a profit. How did that happen? Did the government do that? But even beyond that dirty gasoline that nobody wants to use because it's going to make the planet explode or something, what about the current electrical charging network that we have right here in the United States of America? That's right. A private entrepreneur with his publicly traded company, the most valuable automobile manufacturer in America, Tesla and Elon Musk. They built a network of chargers. It cost them a little over $1 billion, and it works. Is it in every rural town? No. You know why? Because people there don't want to drive electric cars. But there's a ton of them all up and down the eastern seaboard. And I could drive a Tesla from my home in Washington, D.C. area all the way to San Francisco by using the network of chargers that has been installed without the government paying for it, but by a private corporation. So please explain to me, Mr. Secretary, since it's much more complicated than putting just a thing and plugging it into the ground, maybe you could explain how Tesla was able to do it. What a smarmy little smartass this guy is.
But we've been working with each of the 50 states. Every one of them is getting formula dollars to do this work,
7 or
engaging
8,
them in the
though?
first handful. Again, by 2030, 500,000 chargers. And the very first handful of chargers are now already being physically built. But again, that's the absolute very, very beginning stages of the construction to come. The reason that we're investing federal dollars is to fill in some of the gaps in areas where it is not yet profitable for the private sector to do it. Now, again, the majority of charging will happen at home. And in some senses, an electric vehicle has more in common, fueling it has more in common with charging your phone than it does with filling up a gas car in ways that are both helpful and challenging.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'll leave you with that because how many times have you been traveling and your phone has run out of juice and you can't find a charger anywhere and you're stranded and you're stuck and you can't communicate with anybody? And we've already ripped out all of the pay phones in this country because everybody's got a mobile phone and everyone should be able to charge. And when you don't have that charge, well, you are screwed, aren't you? And that's exactly, and I mean exactly what will happen with electric cars based on these guys' plans. Listen, if you follow the private industry and the private sector and you let the market forces play it well, then you get a Tesla, a company that, like it or not, has been able to figure out and crack the code on how to make an affordable electric vehicle that people want and also build a network of chargers that people use. So obviously, you can either follow Elon Musk's lead. I think the guy's been doing something right. He's literally the richest man in the world. Or you can follow the great success that Pete Buttigieg has had. I know who I'm following.